All right, so we're back and ready for another deep dive, this time into a whole year of Life is a Journey with Nigel and Tundi.
Yeah, 14 episodes of content to unpack.
Exactly. So think of us as like your guides,
Yeah.
pointing out all the most interesting stops along the way.
Helping you connect the dots between all those different conversations they had over the year.
Right, and by the end, you'll be ready to jump into any Life is a Journey fan group with some serious insights.
Sounds fun. Where do we start?
Well, I think it's interesting how they kept coming back to this theme of like the good old days versus the digital age.
Oh, yeah. They definitely spent a lot of time talking about life before the internet.
Remember those days, encyclopedias, trips to the library?
It's amazing how much has changed in such a short time.
Right, and it makes you think about like how all this instant access to information is shaping the next generation.
Like Tundi's kids, he actually makes them wait for their food sometimes instead of just giving it to them right away.
He's trying to teach them patience in a world where everything's so instant.
It's like a counterbalance to all the instant gratification.
Exactly, and it kind of relates to what Nigel was saying about growing up pre-internet. You had to be resourceful. You had to really work to find answers.
Now we have information overload, but it's often surface level and fleeting.
Right. It's this weird paradox. We're more connected than ever globally,
Yeah.
but sometimes it feels like we're more isolated locally.
Like Tundi's story about those couples using an app to signal they're in the mood instead of, actually talking to each other.
Oh my God, that was so funny, but also kind of disturbing.
It really highlights how technology can sometimes complicate our relationships instead of simplifying them.
And then there's the whole pressure of keeping up with the digital age, especially as parents.
Oh, yeah. They both talked about the anxieties of like screen time and online safety.
And that always-on work culture, it's like the boundaries between personal and professional life have completely blurred.
Makes it hard to disconnect and just be present.
Tundi even admitted to feeling anxious about his kid's safety in a world where everything's accessible online.
It makes you wonder, does all this connectivity come at a cost?
That's the million-dollar question, and it seems like Tundi's trying to combat that by limiting his kids' phone use.
Encouraging them to meet friends face-to-face instead.
Like he's trying to create those natural boundaries that existed before smartphones.
Which is interesting because they also talked about the BeReal app, that whole push for online authenticity.
Right, but it ultimately didn't really take off.
So it makes you wonder, can we really be authentic online when everything feels so staged and filtered?
I wrestle with that question all the time. And speaking of wrestling with tough questions, they also had a lot to say about resilience.
Oh, yeah, both as individuals and as parents.
Like Tunda's approach to dealing with bullies and criticism, he has this concept of a mental weighing scale.
Right, teaching his son to assess the weight of hurtful words and not let them crush him.
It's a powerful way to reframe negativity. But even Tundi admits that parenting is a constant balancing act.
He talked about those ongoing chore wars, how necessary they are, but also how the constant nagging can feel counterproductive.
How do you handle chore battles in your household?
Oh, it's a constant struggle, believe me. But Nigel and Tunde didn't shy away from tough topics. They went from chores straight into a debate about electric vehicles.
Yeah, they weren't afraid to poke holes in that whole green car narrative.
Pointing out the hidden environmental costs, like the mining of rare earth minerals and the disposal of those huge batteries.
It's cleaner where you drive, but what about where the car is made and the resources are extracted?
They called it outsourced pollution. Definitely made me think twice.
And then they seamlessly connected that to a discussion about data collection and privacy in our increasingly smart world.
Tunda's story about his Google phone recognizing music playing on another device totally creeped me out.
It really highlights how much these devices are listening and gathering information about us without us even realizing it.
It's a bit unsettling, right?
Especially when you think about the potential for that data to be misused or even weaponized.
And that's where they brought up that crazy story about the hacked robot vacuum demanding money.
I mean, seriously, imagine a device in your home suddenly turning into a digital extortionist.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie, but it highlights the very real vulnerabilities we face in this hyper-connected world.
And it raises those bigger questions about security and privacy in the age of smart devices.
Are we trading our privacy for convenience?
And what are the long-term consequences of that trade-off?
It's something we all need to be thinking about as we invite these devices into our homes and lives.
Definitely. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've got a lot more to unpack from Nigel and Tundi's 2024.
So buckle up. We're just getting started.
Yeah, this deep dive is about to get even deeper.
It's wild, right, how these seemingly harmless devices can turn against us.
It's like a reminder that we're not always in control, even in our own homes.
And that lack of control can be especially unnerving when it comes to something as personal as parenting.
Oh yeah, They had a lot to say about the pressures of raising kids in today's world.
And they were refreshingly honest about their own struggles. They didn't try to sugarcoat things.
Yeah, Tundi admitted that sometimes he just has to remind himself that it's okay to not be perfect.
Right, it's like this pressure cooker of expectations, especially with social media. Everyone's presenting this picture-perfect version of parenthood.
But behind the scenes, it's messy and chaotic, and that's okay.
Exactly. And they emphasize the importance of being open and honest with your kids, even when it's difficult.
Like Nigel explaining his decisions to his daughter, even when she was upset about them.
Like that time he made her ride her bike to school in the rain.
He wanted her to learn that she could handle a bit of discomfort, build up that resilience.
But it's also about knowing when to offer support, striking that balance between pushing them and comforting them.
Right, and they talked about finding that balance between being authoritative and knowing when to give in.
Tundi confessed that sometimes he just caves and orders pizza for dinner because sometimes as a parent you just need a break.
It's about being human, not trying to live up to some impossible standard.
Totally, and they didn't shy away from heavier topics either. They had a really powerful conversation about suicide.
Yeah, it was prompted by a tragic loss in their community.
And they shared some heartbreaking statistics, like how many people who attempt suicide say they felt the world was better off without them.
But they also highlighted the fact that those who survive often feel immense gratitude that they didn't succeed.
Realizing how much they were loved and how much they would have been missed.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and connection can make all the difference.
They really stress the importance of talking about mental health and reaching out to those who might be struggling.
Sometimes just asking, "Are you okay?" can be a lifeline for someone.
It's about showing up for each other in real and meaningful ways.
And speaking of showing up, they had a fascinating discussion about the different masks we all wear in social situations.
It's like we're constantly adapting our behavior and personality to fit the expectations of the environment we're in.
Nigel made a great analogy about wearing a uniform. If you work at the circus, you have to dress like a clown.
Right. But they also cautioned against losing sight of our authentic selves in the process.
It's about finding that balance between fitting in and being true to who we are.
They both shared stories about feeling like they were putting on a show, especially in professional settings.
And how challenging that can be for younger generations who are already dealing with questions of identity and self-expression in the age of social media.
It's a lot to navigate.
But they made an important distinction between being authentic and demanding that everyone accept you exactly as you are.
Sometimes it's about meeting people halfway, finding common ground, and understanding that not every environment will be a perfect fit.
And that brings us back to technology and how it's changing the way we interact with the world.
They really dove headfirst into the world of smart devices and the ever-growing mountain of data they're collecting about us.
It all started with Tunde's journey into home automation. He talked about his love for the convenience of having his lights turn on automatically and his energy usage monitored in real time.
But he also expressed concern about the lack of control he has over his data and who has access to it.
And then he dropped that jaw-dropping story about the hacked robot vacuum demanding money from its owner.
Talk about a home invasion of the digital kind.
It really brought to life the potential security risks we face in this hyper-connected world.
And it gets even creepier when they start talking about hyper-personalized content and how algorithms are used to target us with ads and information that play on our deepest fears and desires.
It's a form of manipulation that can be incredibly difficult to resist, especially when we're not even aware of what's happening.
They expressed a lot of concern about the erosion of critical thinking in a world where we're constantly being bombarded with information designed to confirm our existing biases.
It's scary to think about being fed information that only confirms our existing biases and then becoming unable to see other points of view.
That's a great way to put it. It's like we're losing the ability to have a nuanced, informed debate.
Well, speaking of different perspectives, Tundi made an interesting observation about religion.
Yeah, he noticed that younger generations in Vietnam are less religious, which contrasts with his experience in Canada, where his wife found a sense of community through church.
This prompted a fascinating discussion about the role of religion and community in providing hope and support, even for those who aren't religious.
It seems like the need for connection and belonging is universal.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how they transitioned from that into Nigel's reading of Failing the Right Way.
He highlighted the idea that failure can be destructive, but it's also the fastest path to learning.
It made me think about how I view failure in my own life. Does it hold me back, or do I see it as an opportunity?
It's a question worth pondering, and to illustrate this point, Nigel and Tuna shared a hilarious analogy about classic cars.
Like a rusty old car is scrap metal in a junkyard, but a priceless treasure at a collector's auction.
It highlights how the value of something or even someone can change depending on the context.
It's like we each have a hidden vintage car inside of us, just waiting for the right environment where our unique talents and experiences are appreciated.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground already: generational shifts, tech anxieties, parenting philosophies, even a bit of book wisdom.
And we're just getting started. It's crazy how much ground they covered in just a year.
Yeah, it's like a crash course in all the big questions of life.
From the personal to the global, the everyday to the existential.
And they weren't afraid to get real, to share their own struggles and vulnerabilities.
That's what makes their insights so relatable and powerful.
Totally, like when they talked about authenticity and that feeling of having to wear different masks in different social situations.
Right, Nigel even compared it to wearing a uniform. Like if you work at the circus, you have to dress like a clown.
But they also cautioned against losing ourselves in those roles. Forgetting who we are beneath the surface.
It's like that constant tension between fitting in and being true to yourself.
Especially in a world where we're constantly presenting a curated version of ourselves online.
It makes you wonder, can we ever truly be authentic in a digital age?
It's a tough question, and I don't think there's an easy answer.
But they made a good point about how authenticity doesn't mean being rigid or demanding that everyone accept you exactly as you are.
It's about finding that balance between honoring your own values and respecting the boundaries of different environments.
And that ties into their conversation about mental health.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that we all struggle sometimes, and it's okay to ask for help.
That story about the pilots who are afraid to go to therapy because they might lose their jobs was so powerful.
It really highlights the stigma that still exists around mental illness.
And the need for more open and honest conversations about mental health.
They really stressed the importance of creating a culture where seeking help is seen as a sign of strength, not weakness.
Absolutely. And that's where community comes in, having people you can rely on who will support you without judgment.
Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together trying to navigate the ups and downs of life.
And that's something that Nigel and Tunde really emphasize in their podcast, that sense of shared humanity.
And that even amidst all the chaos and uncertainty, there's still hope.
Hope for a better future, hope for connection, hope for meaning.
And I think that's a really powerful message to leave us with.
Especially as we wrap up this deep dive into their year of conversations.
It's been a journey for sure.
Filled with insightful observations, thought-provoking questions, and a healthy dose of humor.
So as we sign off, we want to hear from you what resonated with you most from Nigel and Tunde's 2024.
What insights will you carry with you into the new year?
Because ultimately, that's the power of a good conversation.
Yeah.
It stays with you long after it's over.
So keep those conversations going, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep connecting.
And until our next deep dive, keep journeying.